The water we use in our homes for drinking and bathing here in the Coachella Valley comes from the groundwater basin or aquifer, and that supply is then recharged with Colorado River water.
California is on top when it comes to water rights on the river, but that has come with constant challenges and fights.
Morning anchor Angela Chen traveled to Colorado and Arizona to learn about the complex river system in crisis because of chronic overuse and a century of fighting over those water rights.
There is an old Mojave tale telling of the creation of the Colorado River. It is said the Great Spirit, Matovil, created the sky and earth, but he is murdered, and in his place, his son, Mastamho, takes charge of the world and people. He plunges a staff in the ground and gives life to the river.
That's who we've always been, people who lived along the waters of the Colorado River.
Mastamho gives the river to the people who flourish for thousands of years with trade networks all the way to the ocean. The gifts of the river were for them, for the Pipa Aha Maka, or people by the river. I sat with the Colorado River Indian tribes in Parker, Arizona.
These are ancestral lands for us. Just because the reservation was formed in 1865 doesn't mean that these were new lands for the Mojave people.
The law of the river is first in time, first in right, and as such, tribes who have been here have the most senior rights, but that doesn't mean they can always access it.
About a third of the people that live on the Navajo Nation currently have no water to their homes. They have to pick up their water from trucks. They have no running water in their homes, even though the Navajo Nation has very senior water rights on the system. But they don't have the infrastructure to bring the water into their homes.
I grew up going to my grandparents' house, and we'd have to, load up all the water trucks and go get water and bring them back and pump them into the places that we needed them.
Here with the Colorado River Indian tribes, whose reservation was established in 1865 right over the border of California here in Arizona, the river sweeps through their land. Water access is not a problem, but ownership is. The canals delivering river water to them are owned by the federal government. The tribe says they have not been maintained.
We have a history of stepping up to the plate and repairing the system that's not ours, just to ensure that that water gets delivered where it's needed.
Cracks in traveling trees and unlined canals mean a loss of water. They say only 54% of the water owed to them actually makes it to them. Indigenous people have historically been left out of water negotiations.
One of the sayings that my grandfather would always say as a child was that if you're not at the table, you're on the table. All tribes need to have a seat and representation with decision makers.
But the struggles of tribes have been largely pushed to the wings as the spotlight remains on the crisis between states. And between the 7 that use the water, California is king. Where water flows, money follows, and that is where the antler-locked negotiations live.
Water equals dollars. Water equals growth and growth potential. It's really difficult for policymakers within their states to accept less water, less growth, less opportunity within their own economy. It's all about money.
The river follows what's called a prior appropriation system. Whoever claims rights first has priority over everyone else. After the tribes are those who filed with the government first. And number 1, filed in 1877, is Palo Verde Valley, right next to the Coachella Valley. We are about 2 hours outside of the Coachella Valley on the border. This is the Colorado River, and I'm standing on the Arizona side. That other side is actually California. You are looking at the Palo Verde Irrigation District Diversion Dam, and this place is actually of special significance because all of the water you see here goes to feed the farms in Coachella Valley, Imperial Valley, and Palo Verde Valley, which in turn feeds about 85% of America. Also high on the list is the Imperial Irrigation District, the largest water consumer along the Colorado, receiving 70% of California's share.
And what does IAD do with all that water? Well, IAD delivers it. And then what happens there is we deliver to 9 cities and communities, but that's a very small fraction of the overall water that we do deliver. 97% of it goes to agriculture.
Farms use most of the water to feed America. Between 7 states, this small valley gets 20% of all Colorado River water. It makes them powerful, and it makes them a target.
So one irrigation district in Southern California with some of the oldest rights in the system took up a vast amount of the water. And when you think about the other demands on the system, using that much water in a single irrigation district at the bottom of the system can become highly problematic and controversial.
We're using this for the benefit of the greater good, and what IAD has been doing for 20 years is not only having its growers grow to meet the food supply, it has been conserving, and we've been conserving a vast amount of water for us 20 years.
Conserving because we've been in a drought for the past 23 years, worsened by human-driven climate change and hotter temperatures.
There's going to be more demand, more consumption. Plants, vegetation, they transpire and evaporate more. There's more evaporation from lakes Meade and Powell. So that means there is less water available for everybody else.
With the drought and the drying of the river, the federal government earlier this year mandated the states hammer out a solution to use up to 30% less water. This has led to other states calling for California to use less. Coursing underneath this conflict is a decades-long venomous rift between California and Arizona, the most junior in water rights. Here's why critics say California's usage might be unfair. The 7 states that use the water are divided by the upper and lower basins. Each basin gets 7.5 million acre-feet total. But the thing is, the upper basin states don't always need to use their entire share, letting the water they don't use flow down to the lower basin states of Nevada, Arizona, and California.
The lower basin has always been using their 7.5 million acre feet. That doesn't leave a whole lot for the upper basin. They're claiming, well, you know, we're entitled to our full 7.5 million acre feet, or we're at least entitled to use more water. You can't tell us we need to stop right now, but that's part of the controversy.
And since lawmakers overallocated the water, we've never had enough to go around. If the day comes that upper basin states want to use their full share, California could have to cut all water use in half, drastically changing how life here would look. It's why California fights so hard for its full share each year. Then there are critics who say the water has been mismanaged for decades.
We built this foundation of law and infrastructure to solve a problem, which is water scarcity. We spent billions of dollars to put in that infrastructure, and we still have water scarcity. I would propose that infrastructure is not how you solve this problem.
And that is the conundrum, a solution as slippery as the waters that run. In Parker, Arizona, Angela Chen, News Channel 3.
So the states now have until 2026 to come up with a permanent plan to use less water along the Colorado. Negotiations are still in the early stages, and it's likely to be a very difficult fight.
And this series was supported by the Water Desk, an independent journalism initiative based at the University of Colorado Boulder's Center for Environmental Journalism.